Hello and welcome to TEQ. I am your host, Carolina Milanesi, and today we are live from AWS reInvent, and I am with Chris Walker, who is the Director of Sustainability at AWS. And we want to tackle a conversation that I think is a little bit overdue from an industry perspective, which is really looking at the dual role that AI plays within sustainability. On the one hand, really helping sustainability strive forward and using anything from understanding, optimizing and understanding farming to electricity in a factory, to also though having a second role, which is the one that consumes a lot of compute power. And so figuring out how we continue to build sustainable solutions from the get-go that help us understand this dual role that AI is going to play. And I think that for me, and the reason why I am delighted to have Chris, who is not only passionate about sustainability, but is well recognized in the industry for your high values and ethics, which I think come into play when we talk about sustainability. And I want to start with really the role that sustainability and Gen AI have, this kind of intertwined relationship that they have. And starting with the fact that we really don't know. We're talking about power requirement when it comes to AI, right? And there's a lot to talk about that, but we don't know because everything is moving. Yes, we're going to require more power, but at the same time, the models are becoming more efficient. What we do know is that we need to start to think about sustainability now in order to continue to grow. And I'm curious how you think about it from AWS's perspective, both for yourself and your customers.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, right? Society in general and us as individuals are starting to use and rely on tech even more than I think we ever thought we would at one point, right? I think the things that we do know is AI plays a critical role in enabling us to not only meet sustainability challenges, but also scale the work that you kind of mentioned, right? Some of the AI work or scale with society right now, whether it's our computers and our phones or electric vehicles. There is challenges with both speed and scale that I think AI is going to enable society to kind of take on. When you think about AWS and how we think about it for our data centers and our business, it's not just in a single silo. It's across each of the areas that we operate in, how we design our data centers, how we construct our data centers, how we operate our data centers with both efficiency, innovation, and sustainability in mind from the get-go. Data centers and our data centers specifically are, been shown that we're over 4 times more efficient than on-prem data centers. And, we're lowering our overall embodied carbon with our new designs. We're taking and driving water positive goals and, 2030 goals within our water positive space. And it's exciting to be here with you, this week because we are rolling out new components around our data center designs, which is really, really exciting for us to finally talk about. And when we think about how data centers are kind of evolving, for us, it really starts with efficiency. And like I mentioned, it starts up front. But our new designs, our new components that we're rolling out, we're lowering our embodied carbon by 35%. We're lowering our carbon intensity by 14%. Our mechanical energy that we're using inside those sites is lowering by 46%. And then, we're seeing increased capacity on top of that, right? So our customers are seeing over 10% more capacity inside of our data centers while we're lowering all of the other sustainability and environmental related targets within our sites. And so that's just one way we're doing it. There's a variety of other ways, but it's really exciting for us to start talking about some of the new ways we're innovating here.
But it does come with an initial commitment to build that way, right? You have to be well aware of what needs to get done in order to, so I guess, that conscious action of building in a specific way is important.
I think I would take it one step further from conscious. I would say it's intentional. You have to be intentional about how you're designing and building and operating your data centers.
Absolutely.
And if you don't take that in to account at the very beginning and start thinking about it as a flywheel as opposed to kind of a linear checklist per se, I think that's where organizations and industries get in trouble. And I think with AWS specifically, we have a responsibility at the scale that we're operating at to continue to innovate in a bunch of different ways rather than just in a singular way.
So you mentioned briefly water as one of the big aspects after power that comes into play when you're talking about data centers.
Yep.
What are you doing in that aspect as far as keeping on track with your goal to be water positive?
Yeah, in 2022, we set a goal to be water positive by 2030, and there's a lot of water goals that float around the industry. And what that means for us as AWS, it means that we'll return more water to the communities than what our sites use. Right, and so there's a variety of different ways we do that, but there's really four main ways. The first is increasing the use of sustainable water sources, right? And water is interesting because it's a very hyper-local problem, hyper-community level problem. And so investing in discovering more sustainable water sources that we can use for our data centers is kind of the first step. The second one is improving our water use efficiency, right? So if we're using water, how efficiently are we using that water, and for what reason are we using that water? The next one is reusing as much water, right? Figuring out ways to reuse the water overall. And then the last thing is through water replenishment programs. And I kind of mentioned some of the hyper local projects, but those water replenishment programs really take an active partnership with hyper local and the community level. Kind of through those variety of things, those initiatives, we're over 40, actually right on 41% of the way there to our water positive goal right now, which, we still got 5 years to get there. Equally as important are the efficiency that we use our water. And so we kind of measure that through a ratio. It's called the water usage effectiveness, WUE measurement. Our water usage effectiveness number is 0.18 liters per kilowatt hour. And so there's a lot to that, but what I think is important to remember about that is we've seen a step change year over year. So in 2022, we had a 5% decrease in our WEE, and then from 2021, we saw 28%, and then from 2022, we saw a 5% change. And so we're continuing to decrease that efficiency, well, increase the efficiency, decrease the ratio. You know what I mean. But through those projects, we have over 21 replenishment projects globally, and we're returning more than 7 billion liters of water at a global level. It's really, really exciting for us to see that scale and really start taking it in effect, especially at the community level.
We are talking about power, we're talking about water. And so when we talk about power, we're talking about efficiencies and all of that. But you can't really talk about the future without investing in alternative power supplies, right? And this is something that AWS and Amazon as a whole has done for quite some time. What are you looking at right now and you see as the biggest opportunity going forward when we're thinking about alternative power?
Yeah. I think first off, you mentioned some of our renewable energy stuff, and that's a space that gets me really excited to talk about because we're working on a lot of stuff. The renewable energy space is a space that we have intentionally worked in that space for several years. And we're the largest corporate purchaser of renewable energy for 4 years running. Yep. We have over 500 projects across the globe, and we've invested billions of dollars into that space. You kind of mentioned what the evolution of that space is. And when you think about carbon-free energy, we see relying on carbon-free energy as one of the most impactful ways for us to meet our net zero carbon by 2040 goal, right? We have recently announced 3 different agreements, 3 different initiatives, specifically around small modular reactors. And when you think about beyond renewable energy and beyond the current kind of utility power generation, nuclear and small modular reactors, that is the wave of the future. That's where the industry is going. That's where data centers need to go. And so those 3...
Can you explain a little bit more? Because I know that people get really a little bit nervous when
say nuclear.
Yes.
Yeah. Nuclear is interesting. And so when you think of large-scale nuclear reactors, those are the ones that you see in the headline news, you see, on the cover of Time, et cetera. those are large-scale reactors are the current technology that exists. There continues to be innovations and investments in that space. We continue to work with companies to innovate and invest in scaling that technology in a very safe way and in a very cost-conscious way. The wave of the future in the nuclear space is SMRs, and I'll explain kind of what SMRs is. It's a significantly smaller footprint, much more fuel efficient, has a significantly faster build time. It's also a proven technology, right? SMRs have operated in our society for years at this point, especially within our Navy and our armed forces around the world, right? Our U.S. Navy nuclear fleet is powered by SMRs on board. We have engineers and operations, and there's a whole industry of folks that know this technology and that has proven it out. And so when we think about where the industry needs to go, given the investments and given the space that we need to operate that in, SMRs is the path. And I think, so we've kind of taken a three-prong approach to our SMR approach. We have two of our bigger regions are kind of the Pacific Northwest and Northern Virginia, right? We've partnered with utility companies in each of those areas, Energy Northwest out in the Pacific Northwest, and we've partnered with them to invest in 4 SMRs up in their area, which will initially be 360 megawatts and could potentially scale up to 960 megawatts, which is roughly the amount of power for about 770,000 U.S. homes. But they will, the investment is meant to be in their area. We've done kind of a similar function with Dominion out in the U.S. East, where we are making an investment for just about 300 megawatts of SMR technologies within their U.S. East area to power carbon-free energy for the Virginia area. So those are the 2 utility investments. And the third prong is investing in the technology. And so we've made an investment with X Energy, which is a company that's developing SMRs to invest in 5 gigawatts of new nuclear SMRs. Those will likely be used more in the Pacific Northwest as Dominion kind of works through their technologies in their space. But we see that as a kind of future-proofing way for us to invest in that technology because we know it's coming and we know we need to continue to lean in there.
Yeah. So we tackle water, we tackle power, and we looked at it from what we can do to make AI sustainable. But now we can flip it and look at what AI can do to help us be more sustainable, right? So there's a lot, I think, that can be done, both from your perspective, but then as you help your customer use generative AI to get to their goals, to understand their needs and requirements, and also reporting, which is becoming more and more demanding.
Yes, for everybody.
Yes.
It's an interesting problem, and this week actually I'm giving a presentation along with Michael Stiller of NASDAQ, and it's timely you asked this question, but NASDAQ built a tool off of Amazon Bedrock, and they were able to really understand. So their ESG department sat down with customers and companies to understand where the pain points were around ESG reporting, right? And as you can imagine, there's a lot of pain points in the area. Yes. But the pain points really were around where their staff was spending time and also where they were spending money on consultants. And a lot of that was around data analysis, data analytics, just in general reporting, doing research across the industries. And so they kind of took a step back and they partnered with AWS and used Amazon Bedrock. And they built a solution, a serverless AI solution that really enables the analysis of large volumes of unstructured data. It's called NASDAQ Sustainable Lens. And they've been able to kind of release that to their customers. And it takes exactly what the name does. It takes a lens of sustainable data and makes it just a little bit more accessible for different companies. And it cuts out a lot of those countless hours that their staff or consultants were using. So they're already starting to see returns in that space.
And that was kind of my next question for you, and you started to answer it, which is that a lot of people, including me, think that AI is going to be only as good as the data that can be used to
Right.
generate that insight. And so what, except, on top of what you just mentioned about the NASDAQ event, what are the kind of things that you are empowering your customers with when it comes to data and specifically using data to empower AI to deliver a
Data
better
management aspects, yeah. So there's a couple different ways, and I think accurate reporting, first off, is kind of critical when it comes to this space, right? Not only for regulatory purposes, but also to make critical decisions and decision making off of, right?
Yeah.
So when you think of company boards of companies, or even sustainability and C-suite executives trying to make different decisions and earn trust and make sure that their business is adaptable, having the right set of data and accurate data is critical. And so we kind of think about it in two different ways, and two different examples I have. And the first is the sustainability data fabric. And this is a purpose-built framework that enables faster and more accurate insights, right? It takes large sets of data, really focuses on using kind of open, scalable, modular technology and architecture, and allows that data to be ingested to provide and give a framework for those sets of tools for, whether it's for reporting or to hand to sustainable executive to make a handful of decisions based off of. And then, when it comes to the applicability of that, we have a strategic partner in Accenture, and Accenture's helped customers implement SDF into their data modules and to not only accelerate, but also to empower sustainability teams to make decisions based off of that data, right? And customers across the board are in a bunch of different maturity levels. Some have full sustainability teams set up. Some have an individual or two, right? And Accenture's really kind of democratized some of that access to customers of different maturity levels.
Yeah, and that's what we want, right? We want the ability for organizations of all sizes to be able to comply to the reporting, but also do the work.
Correct.
And instead of spending all their time
one would
just
argue the
ticking
latter.
boxes, exactly,
it might
is
be more important. Right?
Absolutely. So there's one aspect that I was actually walking the show floor earlier around the sustainability side, and there was a very interesting demo around circular economy. And it's interesting because as a tech analyst, covering anything from PC to smartphone, the circular economy discussion is quite easy for people to understand when you're thinking about plastic and reusing metals and all of that. When it comes to data centers, it's a bit harder for people to understand what can happen there, but it's pretty amazing the kind of things that you can do. Can you talk us through that?
Sure. And this is a space that's near and dear to me. So I started at AWS almost 12 years ago, right? And we had data centers that were operating for a handful of years at that point. But I've seen kind of the life cycle of some of our data centers and some of the components start becoming end of life and coming out of those sites. And so it's exciting to finally start talking about some of this great work we're doing. And so when we think about circular economy, there's really kind of a three-prong approach we take. The first is designing better. We work with our hardware engineering teams to make sure that the materials that we're using have sustainability and circular economy in mind at the very forefront. And so it's exciting that we have 30% of our materials going into the components are either recycled or bio-based plastics, which is fantastic. The second prong is really, how do we operate longer? How do we safely operate the materials and the equipment inside of our data centers at a longer pace? So our servers run, we push them from 5 years to 6 years. Our S3 hard drives are now running, a couple of years beyond what we originally thought. That's the easy way to avoid costs and to avoid carbon emissions, is by continuing to find safe ways to operate longer. And then the last piece is, how do we recover more, right? And so what comes out of the data center, it's really exciting because we have more than 99% of our materials that are sent to reverse logistics hubs are being reused, resold, or recycled. Right, that is a massive volume that's coming out of there. And when we think about our hardware components, we have over 23.5 million hardware components that are being diverted from landfills and being recycled or resold on a secondary market. And so, when we think about circular economy and how we're doing that, we don't just think about it in a linear fashion. We think about, okay, how are we using each piece of those components? And then how do we sit down with our hardware engineering teams at the very beginning to help them influence the designs up front with circularity in mind?
Which is how it's supposed to be done.
Correct.
To be done right. We are almost at time, but before I let you go, I want to double down on how you're helping your customers achieve their goals. We talk about your goals for 2030 being water positive. You obviously, within the climate pledge, have a whole list of other goals that you're working towards. And a lot of your customers are part of the climate pledge too. But aside from data and reporting, what else is AWS doing to help your customers get to their sustainable goal?
Yeah, there's a couple different things that jump to mind. And I think when you think about it generally, our goal is to make sure that there's a wide range of tools, right? And I think sustainability in general, and especially when you start thinking of scope 3, there's not a single silver bullet that's going to help all customers or all industries, right? And so when we think about how do we empower our partners and our customers, you kind of have to take a broad range and sit down and whether it's white glove service or not, you have to figure out how we can help individual customers one at a time. And I think the first one that jumps to mind is Qantas, airline company, and they are currently on track to reduce their carbon emissions by over 50 million kilograms annually. Wow. By them implementing and building out a flight path and a flight plan using AWS. This tool allows them to simulate flight paths and find more efficient routes, more efficient landing routes, more efficient paths that they use. And if they're thinking about new areas, new airports they're going to add on to, it'll automatically ingest those and find more efficient ways for them to travel there. So that's one way. The second way really is with the UK Natural History Museum. And we sat down with the UK Natural History Museum to really learn what pain points existed, but also really help them and empower them to take in and accelerate scientific research within their space. And I think when we worked with their scientists, they were able to build on AWS really and to find an understanding of what biodiversity environmental research programs or papers needed to help continue to drive forward within their space. And honestly, what's been exciting is they've then taken that research to do some urban planning within UK overall, within the general, greater population of London, whether that's, changing biodiversity plots, whether that's implementing small changes or big changes. It's been nice because we've been able to empower them. And it wasn't just, here's a tool. They've been able to take it with their science departments and really implement those changes using AWS.
That's amazing. And you gave a wide scope of how not only you're helping, but how AI can also come into play to help going forward. I always say that the conversation doesn't have to end here, and encourage you to share with the audience where they can find you. Is it LinkedIn the best place?
Yep, I'm on LinkedIn. Chris Walker, AWS, fairly accessible. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so I will continue to be more active on LinkedIn. But that's probably the easiest place to find me, and please don't hesitate to reach out with questions.
Thank you very much for your time. I know you're super busy this week, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you.